The offer stands until Friday, Renata. After that, my board will initiate a hostile takeover. The choice is yours. Landon Valerius's voice is smooth as polished steel, echoing in the cavernous, moonlit lobby of the Onyx Tower. Renata Kensington glares at her rival, her jaw tight with a fury she refuses to show. "Get out of my building, Landon." Landon just smiles, a predatory glint in his eyes. As he turns to leave, his gaze falls on Nate Rowe, who is quietly buffing the marble floors nearby, doing his best to remain invisible. A cruel smirk plays on Landon's lips. He stops and gestures toward Nate with his chin. "Still struggling? Perhaps your janitor has some insights," he says, his voice dripping with condescension. He certainly sees the company from the ground up. Renata's eyes flash with anger at the insult, but then a wave of bitter, reckless frustration washes over her. She turns to Nate, her voice laced with mocking sarcasm. "All right, you heard the man. Give me your brilliant financial advice. What's the master plan for Kensington Enterprises?" Nate stops his buffer, the humming motor dying into a deafening silence. He slowly looks up, first at Landon, then directly into Renata's eyes. His expression is unreadable. "Cancel the Cerberus acquisition," he says, his voice steady and clear. "Your offshore holding company isn't firewalled correctly. It's vulnerable to a leveraged buyout clause hidden in the fine print. When you sign that deal on Friday, you won't be buying a company. You'll be handing over a 51% controlling interest in your company for pennies on the dollar." The silence that follows is absolute, a vacuum that sucks the air from the lobby. Landon's smirk dissolves, replaced by a flicker of stunned disbelief, then a flash of pure rage. Renata doesn't move. She doesn't even seem to be breathing. The janitor's words, spoken with the calm authority of a surgeon diagnosing a fatal tumor, have landed like a physical blow. "What kind of insane nonsense is that?" Landon sputters, his voice a harsh rasp. "Have you been sniffing your cleaning chemicals?" "Renata, this man is clearly unhinged. You should have him fired, better yet, arrested for harassment." But Renata isn't looking at Landon. Her eyes, sharp and analytical, are locked on Nate. She sees no trace of madness in his gaze, only a weary, unshakable certainty. The Cerberus deal was a top-secret defensive maneuver, a poison pill designed to fend off Valerius dynamics. The vulnerability he described, that specific terrifying clause buried in layers of legalese, was a phantom that haunted her private discussions with her legal team. It was a 1 in a million possibility, a risk she had been assured was contained. "Security," Renata says, her voice a low command that cuts through the tension. 2 guards stationed by the entrance immediately step forward. Landon's face twists into a triumphant sneer, assuming they are for Nate. "Escort Mr. Valerius from the premises," Renata continues, her voice like ice. "His presence here is no longer required." Landon's jaw drops. "Renata, you can't be serious. You're going to listen to this nobody?" "I am," she says, her gaze never leaving Nate. "Now leave." The guards flank Landon, their expressions impassive. He glares at Nate, his eyes burning with a look of pure hatred, a look that promises retribution. Then, with a final, disgusted scoff, he allows himself to be led out, the glass doors hissing shut behind him. The lobby is silent again, but the atmosphere has changed. Nate stands frozen, the handle of the floor buffer suddenly feeling slick in his sweaty palm. He just broke the single most important rule of his new life: be invisible. He has been seen, he has spoken, and in doing so, he may have just destroyed everything. "You," Renata says, pointing a single sharp finger at him. "With me." Now she turns on her heel and strides toward her private elevator, not waiting to see if he follows. Nate's heart hammers against his ribs. This is it. The end. He'll be fired, and with no job, there's no money for Lily's medication. The thought sends a jolt of pure terror through him. He abandons his buffer and walks on numb legs, following the most powerful woman in the city into the lion's den. The ride up to the 80th-floor penthouse office is unnervingly silent. Nate stands in the corner of the glass elevator, watching the city lights spread out below like a fallen constellation. It's a world he used to belong to, a world he once understood. Now, he feels like an alien visiting a planet he was exiled from. The doors open directly into her office. It's a vast, minimalist space, dominated by a single, massive desk of black marble and a floor-to-ceiling window that offers a god's-eye view of the metropolis. There are no family photos, no personal trinkets, just power, distilled into glass, steel, and silence. Renata walks to her desk but doesn't sit. She turns to face him, her arms crossed, her expression a mask of controlled intensity. "Who are you?" she demands. It's not a question. It's an accusation. "Nate Rowe," he says, his voice barely a whisper. "Night shift maintenance." "Don't play games with me," she snaps. "There are 3 people in the world who know about the leverage clause in the Cerberus contract. Me, my chief counsel, and the snake I just had thrown out of my lobby. So I'll ask you again. Who are you, and how do you know about my deal?" Nate's mind races. The truth is a weapon that could destroy him. He can't tell her who he was. He can't mention Landon's name in any context other than the one she already knows. He has to stick to the data. "I read things," he says, the answer deliberately vague. "Public filings, market analyses. Sometimes you see patterns that other people miss." "Patterns?" She scoffs, circling him like a shark. "You're telling me you deduced a fatal flaw in a multi-billion-dollar private acquisition from reading public documents? You think I'm a fool?" "No," Nate says, meeting her gaze. "I think you're in trouble. That clause wasn't an accident. It's a trap. It was designed to look like a standard indemnity provision, but the legal language is deliberately ambiguous. It's triggered by the transfer of offshore assets, which is the entire basis of the deal. The moment you sign, Valerius files an injunction, and his lawyers will argue that the clause gives them the right to acquire your shares at a predetermined, catastrophically low price. He's not trying to take your company, he's trying to steal it." Renata stops pacing. She stares at him, her mind visibly processing the information. He didn't just identify the problem. He had just described the exact predatory mechanism of the trap, a scenario her own legal team had dismissed as paranoid fantasy. She walks to her desk and leans against it, her expression unreadable. For a long, agonizing minute, she says nothing. Nate can hear the frantic beat of his own heart. Finally, she speaks, her voice dangerously quiet. "I am in a war, Mr. Rowe, and I am losing. My company is being systematically attacked, and I have a traitor on my board feeding Valerius information. The Cerberus deal was supposed to be my last line of defense. Now you're telling me it's a guillotine." She pushes off the desk and walks toward him until she is standing just a few feet away. Her eyes are like chips of granite. "I don't know if you're a spy, a ghost, or some kind of savant. Frankly, I don't care. Right now, you are the only person who has given me a piece of the truth. So here's the deal." She holds up 2 fingers. 48 hours. That's what you have. I want irrefutable proof that Landon Valerius engineered this trap. I want to know who my traitor is, and I want to know how to turn this entire thing around and destroy him with it. Nate stares at her, speechless. "You want me to investigate your company?" "I want you to save it," she corrects him. "You'll have my personal authority. Full access to any data, any personnel, any resource you need. No one will question you." She leans in closer, her voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "If you succeed, you can write your own check. Name your price. But if you fail, if you're wasting my time, or if this is some elaborate trick, I will personally see to it that you spend the rest of your life in a federal prison. Do we have an understanding?" Nate thinks of Lily, her pale face, her quiet strength. The little bottle of pills on their kitchen counter that gets emptier every day. This is madness. It's a suicide mission, but it's also the only lifeline he's been thrown in 6 years. He takes a deep breath, the ghost of his former self rising from the ashes. "Yes, Ms. Kensington," he says, his voice finding a strength he thought was long gone. "We have an understanding." The air in the office crackled with the weight of Nate's acceptance. Renata gave a single, sharp nod. The decision made. The time for deliberation was over. She strode to her desk and pressed a button on a sleek intercom. "Corinne," she said, her voice crisp. "Clear my schedule for the next 48 hours. All calls, all meetings. Then, I need you to issue a new security credential, Alpha Prime Clearance, for a Mr. Nathaniel Rowe. He is to have unrestricted access to all Kensington networks, databases, and facilities, effective immediately. He will be operating under my direct authority. There will be no questions and no delays. Is that understood?" A calm, professional voice replied from the speaker. "Understood, Ms. Kensington. Is there anything else?" "Yes. Prepare the auxiliary strategy suite on this floor and send up a new in-box secure mainframe laptop. Now, right away, Ms. Kensington." Renata switched off the intercom and looked at Nate. The transformation had begun. He was no longer a janitor. He was a ghost in her machine, a weapon she was aiming at the heart of her enemy. "The strategy suite is across the hall," she said, gesturing toward the door. "It's small, soundproof, and has a direct fiber line to our servers. You'll work from there. The laptop will have everything you need to start. My personal cell number will be on the desktop. You report only to me." Nate could only nod, his mind reeling. Alpha Prime Clearance, strategy suite. He had gone from mopping floors to the company's inner sanctum in less than 15 minutes. A woman, Corinne, with a severe haircut and an efficient demeanor, arrived moments later. She handed Nate a heavy black laptop and a stark white keycard with no name, only a gold chip. She didn't meet his eyes, her professionalism a mask for what was clearly burning curiosity. Renata led him across the hall to a door that looked like a simple closet. She pressed her thumb to a scanner, and it clicked open, revealing a small, glass-walled room. Inside was a minimalist desk, a high-backed chair, and a single, wall-sized monitor, currently dark. A fishbowl. He was on display for the entire executive floor to see. "Go," Renata said simply. "The clock is ticking." Nate stepped inside, the door closing with a soft, definitive click behind him. He was alone. He placed the laptop on the cool surface of the desk and opened it. It booted instantly to a simple, secure desktop. A single icon was in the center: Kensington Archive. He took a deep breath, the familiar scent of new electronics a ghost of his former life. His fingers, calloused from pushing a mop bucket, found the keyboard. The muscle memory was still there. He clicked the icon, and a login screen appeared. He swiped his new card. Access granted. The entire digital soul of Kensington Enterprises opened up before him. Financial records, internal emails, acquisition proposals, personnel files. It was an ocean of data. He knew he couldn't look for the traitor first. He had to prove the trap. He had to find the poison pill in the Cerberus deal. He navigated to the secure folder labeled ACQ_CERBERUS. He opened the primary contract file, a document over 1,000 pages long. He didn't read it. He went straight for the metadata, the history of revisions. He saw the logs of Renata's legal team, the back-and-forth negotiations, and then he saw it. An external revision. A file uploaded from an IP address outside the Kensington network. It was masked, routed through a proxy in the Cayman Islands, but the timestamp was there. 2 weeks ago. At 3:14 a.m., he tried to access the raw upload packet to trace its true origin. Access denied. He frowned. Alpha Prime Clearance should have let him in. He tried again. Blocked. Someone had put a secondary, non-standard encryption layer on that specific file. A digital deadbolt. It was a move of extreme paranoia, or extreme cunning. It was Landon's signature. Nate's mind raced. He couldn't break the encryption from the front. He needed to find a back door. He started mapping the network architecture, his fingers flying across the keyboard. He wasn't just looking at the official schematic. He was looking for the flaws, the old, forgotten pathways. As the minutes bled into an hour, his focus was absolute. The world outside the glass walls faded away. The janitor was gone. The analyst had taken over. But then, a sharp vibration in his pocket shattered his concentration. His phone, a picture of Lily, smiling with a gap in her teeth, lit up the screen. His heart seized. He'd been in this glass cage for over 2 hours. He had forgotten to call. he answered, his voice instantly softening. "Hey, sweet pea. I'm so sorry. I got held up at work. It's okay, Daddy." Lily's voice came through, small and tired. "Mrs. Gable next door brought me some soup. Are you coming home soon?" I can't tonight, Lily Pad," he said, the words feeling like shards of glass in his throat. "I have to work a really long shift, a special project, but I'll be home as soon as I can, I promise." "Okay," she said, her disappointment a palpable thing, even over the phone. "Don't forget to check on my bottle." "I won't," he said, his stomach twisting. He glanced at the small, clear plastic bag he kept in his wallet. Inside were Lily's pills. He counted them again, though he already knew the number. 4. 2 for the morning, 2 for the evening, enough for 2 days. The 48-hour clock wasn't just for Renata. It was for Lily. "I love you, Daddy." "I love you more, sweet pea. Be good. I'll call you in the morning." He hung up, the silence of the room rushing back in, heavier than before. He looked at the encrypted file on the screen, his resolve hardening into steel. Landon wasn't just a rival in a corporate game anymore. He was the man standing between his daughter and the medicine she needed to live. He turned his attention back to the network map. If Landon firewalled the data, he must have a way to access it himself. Nate began searching not for the file, but for the key. He started cross-referencing server access logs with the timestamp of the upload. Who else was logged into the network at 3:14 a.m. 2 weeks ago? He found a match. A single user, not a person. It was an automated account associated with the building's HVAC and environmental systems. It was a ghost account, a relic from an old system upgrade, something no one would ever monitor. It had accessed the network for exactly 2 minutes, uploaded the file, and then logged off. The traitor hadn't just given Landon information. They had given him a key, a way to get inside the castle walls disguised as the air conditioning. Nate started digging into the HVAC account's permissions. They were minimal, except for one glaring anomaly. It had read-write access to a single, obscure directory on the finance server, a folder labeled Archived Audits Q2 2018. It made no sense. Why would an air conditioning unit need access to financial records from years ago? He opened the folder. It was full of thousands of old, boring audit reports. Useless data, a digital junkyard. But Nate wasn't looking at the files themselves. He was looking at the negative space. He sorted the directory, not by name, but by data size. Most of the files were small, between 100 and 200 kilobytes, but one of them was different. It was 150 megabytes. An audit file shouldn't be that big. It was a whale hiding in a school of minnows. His heart began to pound. He opened the file. It wasn't an audit report. It was a compressed, encrypted data packet, a Trojan horse hidden in plain sight. He ran a decryption algorithm. It took 10 agonizing minutes, the progress bar on the screen crawling forward. Then it was done. A folder opened, containing a single item, a video file. He clicked play. The wall-sized monitor flickered to life. It showed a grainy, covertly recorded video of a man sitting in a dimly lit office, his back mostly to the camera. He was talking to someone on a speakerphone. Nate recognized the voice on the phone instantly. It was Landon, and the man in the chair, the one whose face was hidden in shadow. Nate recognized his silhouette. He recognized the expensive watch on his wrist. It was Arthur Clements, Renata's mentor, the most trusted and senior member of her board. Nate stared at the screen, a cold dread washing over him. The problem wasn't just a traitor. The traitor was the man Renata trusted most in the world. And the trap wasn't just for her company. It was for her, personally. Nate's blood ran cold. He felt a dizzying sense of vertigo, as if the floor of the 80-story tower had just fallen away. Arthur Clements. He'd seen the man's portrait in the lobby, a silver-haired patriarch smiling benevolently, displayed next to Renata's own father. The plaque underneath read, "A titan of industry, a mentor, a friend." And here he was, on a secret recording, calmly selling out the woman who considered him family. Nate forced himself to focus, his analytical mind kicking in to suppress the wave of shock. He rewound the video, turning up the volume. The audio was slightly muffled, but clear enough. The final transfer will be made to the holding account in Zurich once the acquisition is signed, Landon's voice said, tinny through the speakerphone. Are you certain she won't get cold feet? Arthur Clements shifted in his chair, his face still in shadow. Renata is proud. She sees this Cerberus deal as her own brilliant move, a way to finally step out of her father's shadow. She won't back down. Her pride won't let her, and the board? The board is mine, Clements said, a chilling lack of emotion in his voice. They trust me. When the time comes, I will advise them that a buyout by your company is the only logical step to save their investment from Renata's reckless maneuver. They will vote with me. Perfect, Landon purred. Her legacy, my company, and your very comfortable retirement. It's almost poetic, Nate's hands clenched into fists. It was all there. The motive, the method, the sheer, breathtaking arrogance of the betrayal. This wasn't just business. This was a patricide, a deliberate, calculated destruction of a legacy by the man entrusted to protect it. His first instinct was to save the file. He knew how this worked. A digital footprint like this was a liability. Once Landon or Clements suspected a breach, this video would be remotely wiped in seconds. He quickly copied the file onto an encrypted partition on the laptop's hard drive, then created a second backup on a micro SD card he found in one of the desk drawers. He slipped the tiny card into the hidden pocket of his wallet, right next to the baggie with Lily's last 4 pills. Evidence and motivation, side by side. Now came the harder question. How could he possibly show this to Renata? He pictured walking up to her and saying, "The man you see as a second father is conspiring to destroy you." She might shatter. She might lash out, accuse him of forging the evidence. A betrayal this deep defied logic. It was an emotional wound, and presenting it clinically could be disastrous. He needed more. He needed cold, hard data to back up the video. He had to build a case so airtight, so irrefutable, that her mind would be forced to accept the truth before her heart had a chance to reject it. He turned his attention back to the data streams. The video gave him everything he needed. Keywords: Zurich, holding account, Clements. He began a new targeted search, no longer a blind hunt, but a surgical strike. He dove into the encrypted international transaction logs for the past 6 months. Hours melted away. The sky outside the window began to lighten from inky black to a bruised purple, then a pale, hazy gray. The city was waking up, but Nate hadn't slept. Fueled by stale coffee from a machine Corinne had left outside his door and the raw, burning anger in his gut, he worked. He found the trail. It was brilliant in its subtlety. A series of small, authorized payments from Kensington's international division to a dozen different shell corporations for consulting services. From there, the money was bundled and rerouted, washed clean through a labyrinth of accounts, until it all trickled into a single, heavily encrypted holding account in Zurich. The account was registered to a shell entity named Argus Holdings. Nate ran a search on Argus Holdings. It was a dead end, completely anonymous, but he didn't need to see the name on the account. He had the video. He now had the entire financial architecture of the betrayal mapped out. Just as he was documenting the final transaction path, a movement in the hallway caught his eye. Arthur Clements was walking past his glass-walled office, a cup of coffee in hand, a paternal smile on his face as he greeted another executive. He paused for a moment, his gaze landing on the fishbowl office. He saw Nate inside, hunched over the laptop, a janitor oddly out of place. Their eyes met through the glass. Clement's smile didn't falter. He gave Nate a small, almost imperceptible nod, a gesture of condescending acknowledgement, the kind a king might give to a stable boy. Then he continued down the hall, disappearing into his own magnificent corner office. Nate felt a chill crawl up his spine. The old man had no idea. He was looking at his own executioner and didn't even know it. The casual arrogance of it, the absolute certainty that he was untouchable, solidified Nate's resolve. He couldn't wait. He couldn't risk letting Clements or Landon get suspicious. He looked at the clock on the monitor. 7:15 a.m. The 48-hour clock was a third of the way down. He spent the next hour compiling his findings into a single, secure file. He started with a simple flow chart showing the money trail from Kensington Enterprises to Argus Holdings. He attached the transaction logs, the server data, the proof of the HVAC backdoor. And at the very bottom, he embedded the video file, the final, devastating piece of the puzzle. He looked at the finished package. It was a digital bomb. He picked up the desk phone, the direct line to the CEO's office. He knew this call would change everything. It would shatter Renata's world, and it would either be the beginning of his salvation or the act that sealed his fate. He took a breath and dialed. She answered on the first ring, her voice alert and sharp, as if she hadn't slept either. "What have you got?" Nate's own voice was low and steady, belying the storm raging inside him. "I have it. All of it. The traitor, the mechanism, the proof." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "But you need to see this in person, and you need to prepare yourself. This is worse than you imagined." A heavy silence hung on the line for a beat. Then Renata's voice came back, devoid of all emotion. "My office, 5 minutes." The line went dead. Nate gathered the laptop, his hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. He took the micro SD card from his wallet and taped it securely to the inside of his belt, a paranoid reflex from a life he thought he'd left behind. Never walk into a meeting without an insurance policy. He stepped out of the glass-walled office and walked the short distance to the CEO's suite, the curious eyes of the early morning executives following his every move. He was no longer just an anomaly. He was a man about to meet with the Queen, and everyone knew a verdict was coming. Corinne, Renata's assistant, stood guard outside the office door. Her professional mask was firmly in place, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of intense curiosity as she opened the door for him without a word. Renata was standing by the massive window, a silhouette against the bright morning sun flooding the city. She didn't turn as he entered. "Show me," she commanded, her voice flat. Nate walked to the conference table at the center of the room and connected the laptop to the large monitor on the wall. He didn't start with the video. He started with the data. He had to build the cage before he revealed the monster. "The vulnerability in the Cerberus deal is intentional," Nate began, his voice calm and even. He brought up the flowchart he'd created. "It's part of a two-pronged attack. The first prong is financial." He walked her through the labyrinth of transactions, his words precise and clinical. He showed her the money flowing out of her company, washed through shell corporations, and deposited into the Zurich account. He pointed out the specific accounting loopholes that were exploited, the digital backdoors that were used. He spoke the language of his past, a language of numbers, patterns, and deceit. Renata watched, her expression unreadable, her posture rigid. She processed the complex data with terrifying speed, her sharp mind absorbing every detail. She was a general seeing the enemy's battle plans for the first time. "This is a masterpiece of fraud," she said, her voice a low growl. "Subtle, patient, nearly invisible. But it's just money. The real attack is the Cerberus clause. That's the kill shot exactly," Nate agreed. "The money trail is the payment for the information that made the kill shot possible. The intel had to come from someone on the inside, someone with access to everything, someone you trust." Renata finally turned from the window, her eyes boring into him. "You said you knew who. Who is Argus Holdings? Who is my traitor?" This was the moment. Nate took a slow breath. "The name on the account is a shell," he said softly. "But I didn't need a name. I found his confession." He minimized the spreadsheets, the screen going black for a second. His hand hovered over the video file. "What you're about to see," he started, then trailed off. There was no way to soften this. He simply clicked play. The grainy, covert video filled the screen. The sound of Landon Valerius's voice, smug and triumphant, filled the silent office, followed by the calm, measured tones of Arthur Clements. Nate didn't watch the video. He watched Renata. For the first few seconds, her expression was one of confusion. Then, as she recognized the voice, her mask of command didn't just crack, it disintegrated. The color drained from her face, leaving her skin as pale as the marble on her desk. A subtle, almost imperceptible tremor started in her left hand. Her eyes, wide with disbelief, were glued to the screen, her body utterly still, as if a single movement would shatter her into a million pieces. She listened to the man she called her mentor, the man who had stood by her father's side for 30 years, calmly and methodically outlining her destruction. She heard him call her proud, reckless. She heard him conspire to steal her father's legacy. Each word was a fresh cut, dismantling the foundations of her world. When the video ended, the screen went black, but the silence it left behind was deafening. Renata stood frozen for a full minute, her gaze fixed on the blank monitor, seeing nothing. Nate didn't speak. He didn't move. He just waited, giving her the space to navigate the wreckage of her trust. Finally, she blinked. Once, twice. She took a ragged breath, the first sign that she was returning to her body. Her hand, which had been trembling, clenched into a tight, white-knuckled fist. The shock in her eyes was slowly being replaced by something else. Something harder, colder, a burning, diamond-hard rage. She turned her head slowly, her eyes meeting Nate's. The vulnerability was gone, locked away behind a wall of pure steel. "That snake," she whispered, her voice rough with a pain so deep it was almost soundless. That ungrateful, treacherous snake. She walked to her desk, her movement stiff, and poured a glass of water from a crystal carafe. She drank it in one long, steady swallow. When she set the glass down, the sound was the only thing that broke the silence. "For 30 years he ate at my father's table," she said, more to herself than to Nate. "He held me in his arms at my father's funeral and swore he would help me protect his legacy." She looked at Nate, a new, dangerous light in her eyes. "And all this time, he's been planning to burn it to the ground." She walked back to the monitor, her focus absolute. The victim was gone. The CEO was back. This isn't just about the company anymore. This is personal. He didn't just betray me. He betrayed my father. He betrayed his memory. She looked from the dark screen to Nate, and for the first time, he wasn't just an asset or an anomaly. He was the only person in the room she knew for certain she could trust. The dynamic between them had irrevocably shifted. "They set a trap for me, Nate," she said, his first name sounding strange and yet perfectly natural on her lips. "Landon and Arthur. They expect me to walk into it on Friday like a lamb to the slaughter." Her lips curved into a smile that held no warmth, only the promise of retribution. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice low and lethal. "How do we burn them to the ground?" Nate had been waiting for this question. He had been thinking about it all night. Revenge wasn't enough. It had to be poetic. It had to be complete. "They've handed us the weapon," Nate said, his own voice hardening. "The Cerberus contract. We don't cancel the deal. We don't run from the trap." He stepped closer to the monitor, a plan crystallizing in his mind, bold and terrifyingly risky. "We let them spring it, but when the jaws snap shut, we make sure they're the ones caught inside." A dangerous light flickered in Renata's eyes. The shock had burned away, leaving behind the cold, clear focus of a predator. "Tell me," she said, her voice a low command. Nate stepped closer, the adrenaline sharpening his thoughts into a fine point. "Landon and Arthur's trap is perfect," he began, "but it has one weakness: their arrogance. They believe you're reacting to a business threat, so they're prepared for a business move. They expect you to cancel the deal, try to renegotiate, or even sue. What they don't expect is for you to knowingly sign their doctored contract." "Because it would be suicide," Renata countered. "Only if it's their contract," Nate said. "We need to amend it. We add our own clause, a reciprocal poison pill, something buried so deep in the legalese that a man convinced of his own genius won't bother to read it." He started pacing, the ghost of his old life taking over completely. "The clause will state that if the leveraged buyout provision is triggered under circumstances deemed to be fraudulent or conspiratorial by an independent arbiter, then the contract is not only void, but all assets of the initiating party, Valerius Dynamics, used as collateral for the attempt are forfeited to Kensington Enterprises as liquidated damages. Renata's eyes widened as she grasped the sheer audacity of the plan. You want to use their trap to bankrupt them. I want to use their trap to annihilate them, Nate corrected her. Landon used a hidden clause to steal my life's work. It's time we returned the favor. A slow, wolfish grin spread across Renata's face. It was the first genuine smile Nate had seen from her, and it was terrifying. I like it, she said. It's vicious, poetic, but it's impossible. My chief counsel, Robert, would have to draft it. He's loyal, but he's part of the system Arthur controls. The moment we ask him to write a clause like that, Arthur will know something is wrong. Then we don't use Robert, Nate said. Renata paused, considering. A look of resolve settled on her face. She walked to her desk and picked up her personal phone, scrolling through the contacts. There's one person, she said, more to herself than to him. She's the only one my father trusted implicitly. She's retired, but she would burn down the world for my family. She pressed the call button. Evelyn, she said, her voice changing, losing some of its hard edge and taking on a tone of respect and warmth. It's Renata. I'm fine, yes. Listen, I need you. Here, in my office. It's an emergency of the highest order. No, I can't explain over the phone. Just, please, Evelyn. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't while she was on the phone. Nate's own phone vibrated. It was a text from his neighbor, Mrs. Gable. Hi, Nate. Lily seems a bit warm. Said her head hurts. Just wanted to let you know. Nate's blood turned to ice. A fever. For Lily, a simple fever wasn't simple. It was a warning sign that her system was fighting something it couldn't handle. A prelude to the episodes of debilitating pain that left her bedridden. The 4 pills in his wallet suddenly felt like 4 grains of sand. He needed to solve this. He needed the money Renata had promised. He needed it now. He was texting back a reply when Renata hung up. She saw the look on his face, the sudden shift from master strategist to terrified father. What is it? She asked, her voice sharp but not unkind. My daughter, Nate said, his own voice strained. She's not well. I can send my personal physician, Renata offered immediately. He's the best in the city. He can be at your apartment in 30 minutes, Nate was floored by the offer, but he shook his head. No, thank you, but no, I don't want her involved in this. I need to check on her. He called Lily's phone. Mrs. Gable answered. He could hear Lily's weak cry in the background. His heart shattered. It's just a small fever, dear, Mrs. Gable said kindly. But she's asking for you. I know, Nate said, closing his eyes, trying to project a calm he didn't feel. Can you give her one of the pills from the bottle on the counter? Just one, and make sure she drinks plenty of water. I'll be home as soon as I can. He ended the call, feeling completely helpless. He was standing in a room worth more than he could make in 1,000 lifetimes, planning a corporate counterattack, while his daughter was sick and scared miles away. She'll be here in an hour, Renata said softly, bringing him back to the present. She had overheard, and for a moment, the billionaire CEO was gone, replaced by a woman who understood the look of fear in his eyes. The alliance between them deepened in that silent moment of shared humanity. An hour later, Evelyn Reed walked in. She was a woman in her late 60s with piercing blue eyes, a razor-sharp haircut, and a presence that seemed to take up all the oxygen in the room. She greeted Renata with a warm but concerned hug, then turned her analytical gaze on Nate. Renata made the introductions. Evelyn, this is Nate Rowe. He is the man who is going to help us save this company. Nate, this is Evelyn Reed. She's the woman who is going to give us the ammunition. For the next 2 hours, the 3 of them became a war council. Nate played the video. Evelyn's reaction was a quiet, seething fury. Arthur, she breathed, shaking her head. After all these years? But her anger quickly gave way to a lawyer's focus. Nate laid out the financial trap, and Evelyn immediately began to formulate the legal counterstrike. He's right, Evelyn said, her eyes gleaming with intellectual fire. The beauty of Landon's clause is its ambiguity. We'll use that. We'll draft a reciprocal indemnity clause. We'll wrap it in standard boilerplate about third-party arbitration and regulatory compliance. It will look like a tedious but necessary bit of housekeeping from our side. Arthur will push it through without a second glance. He's a financier, not a contract lawyer. He won't see the fangs until they're in his throat. They worked, a seamless trio of finance, law, and strategy. Evelyn dictated the precise, lethal language. Nate pressure-tested it, ensuring it was a perfect mirror of Landon's trap. Renata provided the ruthless oversight, trimming every unnecessary word, making it as lean and deadly as possible. By noon, it was done. A single page, dense with text. It looked completely innocuous. It was the most dangerous document Nate had ever seen. Evelyn printed it out. "There," she said with grim satisfaction. "The Trojan horse." Renata took the document, her expression cold and determined. The clock on her wall showed 12:15 p.m. Time was slipping away. "Arthur is meeting Landon for lunch at 1:30 tomorrow," Renata said, her gaze shifting to Nate. "It's their final confirmation before the signing on Friday. We have less than 24 hours to make sure Arthur walks into that lunch with this piece of paper in his briefcase, believing it's his own idea." The question hung in the air, heavy and sharp. How do you convince a master manipulator to willingly carry his own death warrant to a meeting? "We can't push," Nate said, his mind already piecing together the strategy. "If we approach him with an amendment, he'll be suspicious. The change has to come from him. He has to think it's his idea to protect the plan." Renata leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "Exploit his arrogance. Make him think he's outsmarting me." "Exactly," Nate confirmed. "We create a fire, and then we hand him the exact extinguisher we want him to use. We're going to leak a piece of information to him. We're going to make him believe that a different, much more obvious flaw has been discovered in the contract, a red herring." Evelyn caught on immediately, a slow, predatory smile forming on her lips. "We stage a panic. Make him think Renata's team has finally found a loophole and is about to scuttle the deal. He'll swoop in to play the hero and fix the problem, keeping his timeline intact." The plan was audacious, a high-wire act with no safety net. It required perfect execution and nerves of steel. "Here's how we do it," Nate said, taking charge. He laid out the scenario. He would draft a memo detailing a plausible but ultimately harmless flaw, a supposed conflict with a new, obscure EU banking regulation that could delay the transfer of offshore funds. It would be a technical nightmare, threatening to tie up the deal in red tape for months. Renata would then, accidentally, leave a printed copy of this memo on a table in the executive lounge, a place she knew Arthur walked through every afternoon. "He'll find it," Nate said with certainty. "He's a spy in his own house. He's looking for whispers and secrets. He won't be able to resist. And when he comes to me to warn me about this flaw?" Renata asked. "You play the part," Nate instructed. "You're panicked, furious at your legal team for missing it. You're on the verge of calling Landon to postpone everything. Arthur can't let that happen. It would derail his entire scheme. He'll demand a solution, an immediate one." "And that solution," Evelyn finished, tapping the single, deadly page they had drafted, "will be this. I'll be the outside consultant you brought in to handle the crisis. I'll present this as the simplest, cleanest way to patch the hole the trap was set." For the rest of the day, a silent, tense energy filled the 81st floor. Nate drafted the fake memo, filling it with dense, terrifying-sounding but ultimately hollow legal jargon. At precisely 4 p.m., Renata walked through the executive lounge, sat for 2 minutes with a cup of tea, and walked out, leaving the document behind as if she'd forgotten it in her haste. They watched from her office using a discreet security camera feed. 20 minutes later, Arthur Clement strolled through. He poured himself a drink, his eyes casually sweeping the room. They saw him spot the file, a flicker of interest. He glanced around, then casually picked it up, tucking it into his own leather-bound folder. He had taken the bait. The rest of the evening was a long, agonizing wait. Nate tried to work, to trace other connections, but his mind was elsewhere. He thought of Lily, hoping the single pill was enough to keep the fever at bay. The silence was finally broken at 9 a.m. the next morning. Corinne's voice came over Renata's intercom. "Mr. Clements is here. He says it's urgent." "Send him in," Renata said, her voice a perfect imitation of strained anxiety. Arthur entered, his face a mask of grave concern. He held up the fake memo. "Renata, we have a serious problem." The performance began. Renata feigned shock, then fury. She slammed her hand on her desk. She berated her absent legal team. She spoke of canceling the signing. Nate, playing the role of a junior analyst, stood silently in the corner of the room, looking terrified. No, that's too drastic," Arthur said, his voice calm and reassuring. Exactly as Nate had predicted. "Panicking is what Valerius wants. We simply need to close this loophole. A minor amendment should suffice." "There's no time," Renata snapped. "The signing is tomorrow." "There's always time for a solution," Arthur said smoothly. At that moment, as if on cue, Corinne announced the arrival of Evelyn Reed. Evelyn entered, all business. She listened as Renata and Arthur explained the problem. She reviewed the fake memo, frowning with concentration. Nate watched Arthur. The old man was completely absorbed in his role as the steady hand, the wise counselor calming the hysterical woman. He had no idea he was a puppet in a play written for him. "The analyst is correct," Evelyn said, nodding at Nate. "This is a nasty little snag, but Arthur's right. It's fixable." She pulled a single page from her briefcase. "I took the liberty of drafting some standard indemnity language that should resolve the EU regulatory conflict. It's boilerplate, really, but it's clean and bypasses the entire issue. It strengthens our position." She handed the page to Arthur. It was their Trojan horse. Arthur read it over. Nate held his breath. He saw the old man's eyes skim the dense paragraphs. He was looking for phrases about canceling the deal or changing payment terms. He wasn't looking for a reciprocal liability clause wrapped in the language of regulatory compliance. He saw only what he wanted to see. A quick, elegant solution that kept his plan on schedule. "This looks perfectly adequate," Arthur announced, his relief palpable. He was proud of himself. He had averted the crisis. "In fact, it's excellent. Simple. Clean." He turned to Renata. "Let me handle this. I'm meeting Landon for lunch. I'll present this as a final, minor revision from our side. A formality. He'll sign off on it without a thought." He placed the page into his briefcase, snapping it shut with a satisfying click. He had just locked away the weapon of his own destruction. After he left, the three of them stood in silence, the residual tension slowly draining from the room. It had worked. It had worked perfectly. Renata sank into her chair, a long, ragged breath escaping her lips. She looked at Nate, her eyes filled with a mixture of awe and disbelief. "You were a ghost, mopping my floors." "Just 2 days ago," she said, her voice quiet. "Now you're the one pulling the strings of the most powerful men in this city." The compliment didn't land. Nate's phone vibrated with another text from Mrs. Gable. "Fever is a little higher. She's asking for you again." He pulled out his wallet and stared at the remaining 3 pills. The victory felt hollow, a distant thing. The real world, the one that mattered, was miles away and slipping through his fingers. He looked up at the billionaire CEO, the weight of his reality pressing down on him. "I'm just a father," he said, his voice barely a whisper, trying to buy his daughter more time. The air in Renata's office was thick with a tense, controlled silence. They were a command center now, the 3 of them, Nate, Renata, and Evelyn, watching a small, discreet tablet on the conference table. On the screen was a live audio feed, represented by a simple, fluctuating waveform. A high-risk surveillance operation, orchestrated by Renata's head of security, was underway. A tiny microphone, disguised as a cufflink on a trusted waiter's uniform, was their only ear into the most important lunch meeting in the city. They listened to the clink of silverware, the murmur of the restaurant, waiting. The 24 hours they had felt like an eternity and no time at all. "Arthur seems to be enjoying his lobster," Evelyn remarked dryly, trying to cut the tension. Nate wasn't listening to the small talk. He was trying to push the image of Lily's pale face out of his mind. Every minute that crawled by was a minute he wasn't with her. He trusted Mrs. Gable, but trust couldn't break a fever. Just then, his phone rang, a shrill, piercing sound that made all three of them jump. The caller ID read, Northwood Elementary. His heart plummeted. It was the school nurse. "Mr. Rowe?" a concerned voice said. "It's Sharon at Northwood. Lily's fever has spiked quite high. She's a bit disoriented and she's asking for you. I think you need to come get her." The world narrowed to the sound of that voice. The billion-dollar deals, the corporate espionage, it all evaporated. His daughter was sick and scared, and he wasn't there. "I'm on my way," he said, his voice thick. He was already standing, grabbing his jacket, his mind a chaotic whirl of logistics. He could take a cab, get to her in 30 minutes, but then what? He couldn't afford an emergency room visit, not without insurance. "Nate!" Renata's voice cut through his panic. She was standing now, too. "Go! We'll handle this." He looked from the tablet, the mission he was so close to completing, to the door. He was torn. He was the only one who truly understood Landon's mindset, the only one who would know for sure if he was taking the bait. "I can't," he said, the words tasting like ash. "We need to hear this." Renata looked at the raw agony on his face, at the impossible choice tearing him apart. A decision clicked into place behind her steel blue eyes. She picked up her personal phone and dialed. "Dr. Alistair, it's Renata Kensington. I have an emergency. I need your best pediatric team. Not just you, the whole team. Mobile diagnostic unit, everything. I'm sending you an address. I want you there in 20 minutes. No, it's not for me. It's for the daughter of the most important person in my company. Spare no expense." She hung up and looked directly at Nate. Her voice was firm, leaving no room for argument. "My medical team is on its way to your apartment. They will take care of her. They will have everything she needs. Let me handle this, Nate. You and I, we have a different battle to fight right now. Let me fight for your daughter so you can fight for us." Tears pricked at the corners of Nate's eyes. For 6 years, he had been utterly alone, fighting for Lily with nothing but his own 2 hands. Now, in the most unlikely of circumstances, this formidable, powerful woman was using her empire to protect his daughter. "Thank you," he whispered, the words inadequate. "We're partners now," she said simply. "We take care of our own." As if on cue, the audio feed from the tablet crackled to life. Arthur's voice, smooth and avuncular, came through clearly. "A minor bit of housekeeping, Landon. Renata's lawyers are in a panic over some EU regulation. This just cleans it up. A formality, really." There was a pause. Nate, Renata, and Evelyn all leaned in, holding their breath. They heard the rustle of paper. Landon's laugh, arrogant and dismissive, filled the speaker. "Her lawyers are panicking? Good. Let them. Honestly, Arthur, I'm surprised she hasn't cracked completely. Fine. Whatever it takes to get her to sign on Friday. Have her people add it to the final draft?" A collective, silent sigh of relief went through the room. He'd taken it. The hook, the line, the sinker. The trap was set. They were about to switch off the feed when Landon's voice came through again. Lower this time, more conspiratorial. "She's so focused on Cerberus, she's completely forgotten about her real vulnerability. Even if something goes wrong with this deal, which it won't, the Argent Protocol will finish her by the end of the month anyway." Nate and Renata locked eyes. A cold wave of dread washed over their victory. "Argent Protocol?" Arthur's reply was a low chuckle. "One fire at a time, my boy. One fire at a time. Now, about that stock option package you promised me." The conversation shifted, but Nate's mind was stuck. Argent. The word meant silver. Or it could refer to Argentina. Or it could be a code name. A second bomb. They had spent all their energy disarming the bomb they could see, only to find out another one was hidden somewhere in the building, ticking away. The lunch meeting ended. The feed went dead. They had won the battle, but the war was far from over. Renata's phone buzzed. She read the text and looked at Nate, a small measure of relief on her face. "My team is with Lily. The fever is high, but she's stable. They're taking care of everything." Nate nodded, a fraction of the weight lifting from his shoulders. but it was immediately replaced by another, the Argent Protocol. Renata turned to him, her expression grim, all traces of her earlier victory gone. "We baited the trap. Now we have less than 24 hours until the signing," she said, her voice low and intense. "And we need to find out what the hell the Argent Protocol is before it blows up in our faces." The brief moment of relief in the room was a mirage, quickly evaporating to reveal the stark, terrifying landscape of a new threat. Argent. The word hung in the air, a code name for their potential destruction. "Start a search," Renata commanded, her voice regaining its hard edge. "Full network crawl. Every document, every email, every financial report. I want anything and everything with the word Argent in it." Corinne, patched in via speakerphone, immediately relayed the order to the company's data security team. Nate, however, was already shaking his head, his mind racing in a different direction. "It won't be here," he said, thinking aloud. "Landon built this trap. The core of it won't be on your servers. It's an external attack. The word itself, it has to be a tell. Something from his past." He closed his eyes, forcing himself back through the years, back to a time of shared ambition and eventual betrayal. Back to a cramped office, whiteboards covered in equations, the frantic energy of creation. Landon had been obsessed with code names drawn from mythology and history. Cerberus, the guardian of the underworld. And Argent. The memory hit him like a lightning strike, so sharp and clear it made him gasp. "Argent," he breathed, his eyes snapping open. "The Argent Project. It was our name for a predictive modeling algorithm I was designing. It was my life's work." He looked at Renata, the full, sickening weight of the betrayal hitting him all over again. "It was the algorithm he stole the day he framed me. He didn't just build his company on my work. He's using it as a weapon to destroy yours." Evelyn looked grim. "What does it do, this algorithm?" "It was designed to predict volatility," Nate explained, his voice low and intense. "It analyzes millions of data points a second, market trends, news feeds, even social media sentiment, to find patterns of instability before they happen. It was meant to be a shield, an early warning system." He paused, the horrifying implication dawning on him. In Landon's hands, he could reverse it. Instead of predicting a fire, it could start one, a flash crash. He can use it to digitally assassinate your stock. A heavy silence fell over the room. The Cerberus trap was a legal maneuver, a brutal but understandable corporate attack. This was something else. This was a weapon of mass financial destruction, and it was aimed directly at the heart of Kensington Enterprises. "How do we find it?" Renata asked, her voice dangerously calm. "We look for its shadow," Nate replied. He turned back to the laptop, his fingers a blur. He bypassed Kensington's internal network and opened a direct raw feed to the stock market's high-frequency trading data. It was a torrent of pure information, billions of transactions a second, a meaningless waterfall of noise to almost anyone else. But Nate knew what he was looking for. He was hunting for a ghost, his own. As Nate worked, lost in the digital storm, Renata's phone buzzed. It was Dr. Alistair. She listened, her expression changing from tense to something softer, something Nate hadn't seen before. She ended the call and turned to him. "That was the doctor," she said, her voice gentle. Nate's head snapped up, his heart in his throat. "Lily is responding to the treatment. The fever is breaking. But more than that, they ran a full genetic panel. They think they've identified the specific enzyme deficiency causing her illness. Alistair says it's treatable. Not just managed, Nate. Treatable. There's a new gene therapy that has shown incredible results." Nate stared at her, unable to process the words. Treatable. A word he had given up on ever hearing. For years he'd been treading water, trying to keep Lily's head above the waves. Now this woman was telling him she could teach his daughter to fly. The immense crushing weight he had carried on his shoulders for 6 years began to dissolve, replaced by a hope so fierce it was painful. "Renata," he started, his voice cracking. "I don't know what to say." "Say we'll win," she said, her eyes blazing with a new, personal fire. "You save my company. I'll save your daughter. That's the deal." The promise hung in the air, a sacred vow. It was all the fuel Nate needed. He turned back to the screen with a renewed, ferocious determination. He wasn't just fighting for his name anymore. He was fighting for Lily's future. For 2 more hours, he hunted. He filtered out the noise, searching for the faintest of rhythms, the telltale signature of his own complex code. And then he found it. A tiny, almost invisible pulse of high-frequency trades, all focused on Kensington stock. It was a parasite attached to the market, dormant but alive. It was the Argent protocol, waiting. "I found it," he said, his voice grim. "It's armed." "Can we disable it?" Evelyn asked. "No," Nate said. "It's too deep inside the global market architecture. But I can see the trigger." He followed the lines of code, his blood running colder with every discovery. The protocol wasn't just a backup plan. It was the main event. He finally saw the whole, terrifying picture. The elegant, brutal genius of Landon's plan. He leaned back in his chair, a wave of nausea washing over him. He had been so focused on the trap in front of him, he hadn't seen the real one closing in from all sides. He turned to face Renata, his expression bleak. "We've made a terrible mistake," he said, his voice hollow. "The Cerberus deal, it was never the real trap. It was a distraction. A brilliant billion-dollar misdirection." Renata stared at him, confused. "What are you talking about?" "We have them." "No," Nate said, shaking his head. "We don't. The Argent protocol is set to activate at the market close on Friday. It will trigger a catastrophic flash crash of your stock, but it's missing a final authorization key, a final piece of code to unlock its full power." He looked at her, the horrifying truth settling in. "Landon doesn't care if we find the flaw in the Cerberus deal. He just needs you to sign it. The digital signature from the official signing of that contract, that's the final key. The Cerberus trap isn't the bomb." He took a shaky breath. "It's the detonator." The revelation hit the room like a shockwave, collapsing the structure of their carefully laid plan. Their victory was a phantom. Their brilliant countermove was, in fact, the final step in Landon's grand design. "So we're trapped," Evelyn said, her voice grim, stating the obvious. "If we sign, Argent activates and we're wiped out. If we don't sign, Landon initiates the hostile takeover, and with Arthur poisoning the board, he'll win." Checkmate. Renata stared at the wall-sized monitor, her face a mask of cold fury. Nate saw her hands clench at her sides. She was cornered, boxed in by the genius of her enemy. "No," she said, her voice a low growl. "I do not lose." Not to him, she turned to Nate, her eyes blazing. "There has to be a third option, an escape route. You built the engine of this weapon. Is there a flaw? A vulnerability? Is there any way to turn it off?" Nate's mind was already there, sifting through a 6-year-old mountain of code that existed only in his memory. He had built the Argent algorithm to be perfect, a seamless piece of predictive logic. But he had also been paranoid. He'd learned early in his career that any system powerful enough to be a shield could also be a sword. "Landon stole my code," Nate said slowly, his eyes unfocused as he accessed the archives of his mind. "But he didn't understand its soul. He's a brilliant financier, but he's not a creator. He knows how to use it. He doesn't know the philosophy behind it." A memory sparked, a fragment of a late-night coding session fueled by pizza and a fear of his own creation. "I built a failsafe." A kill switch. Renata and Evelyn leaned in. "What kind of kill switch?" Evelyn asked. "It's not a button you can press," Nate explained. "It's a sequence, a specific, nonsensical series of micro-trades, a data string disguised as market activity. It's designed to look like a 1 in a trillion market anomaly, a pattern so illogical it would never occur naturally. If the algorithm detects that exact sequence, its core protocol is to interpret it as a catastrophic system failure and execute an immediate, total shutdown." Hope, fragile but real, returned to the room. "Can you execute it?" Renata asked, her voice urgent. Nate's face fell. "To do it, I need a terminal with direct, ultra-low latency access to the market's central exchange server, And I need a broker who can execute a custom, multi-part trade sequence in the final seconds before the market closes, without filing a flight plan and tripping 100 regulatory alarms. We can't use Kensington's trading desk. Arthur and Landon would see it coming a mile away. They were so close, yet it was an impossible task. They needed a ghost, a traitor who operated in the shadows. Nate's mind sifted through the wreckage of his past, through the faces of colleagues who had turned their backs on him, who had believed the lies. But there was one. Marcus, his former junior analyst, a kid with a genius for market mechanics and an almost fanatical loyalty. Nate had cut ties with him completely to protect him from the fallout. He had no idea where he was now. Renata saw the flicker of a thought on his face. "Who is it, Nate?" "His name is Marcus Thorne." Nate said. "Wait, no, Marcus Cole. He was the best I'd ever seen, but I haven't spoken to him in 6 years. He probably thinks I'm a criminal." "Find him," Renata ordered, already turning to her assistant on the intercom. "Corinne, I need a location on a Marcus Cole. Last known employer was a financial firm called Argent." "No, that's not right. Just find him. Use every resource we have." 10 minutes later, Corinne had an answer. Marcus Cole was now a senior partner at a small, independent high-frequency trading firm, a boutique shop that specialized in exactly the kind of high-risk, high-speed trading Nate needed. Corinne provided a personal cell number. Nate stared at the number on the screen. It felt like a lifetime away. This call was harder than facing down Renata, harder than confronting the ghost of Arthur. This was asking the one person whose respect he valued to believe in him again. He took a deep breath and dialed. The phone rang twice. A familiar voice, older now, but still sharp, answered. "This is Marcus." "Marcus," Nate said, his own voice sounding foreign to him. "It's Nate Rowe." The silence on the other end of the line was a physical thing, a wall of ice. Nate could hear Marcus breathing. "Nate," Marcus finally said, his tone a mixture of shock and cold anger. "After 6 years?" "What the hell do you want?" "I need your help," Nate said, pushing ahead before he could lose his nerve. "It's Landon. He's doing it again, Marcus, but this time it's not just a single fund. He's about to crash a multi-billion-dollar company. He's weaponized the Argent algorithm." He heard Marcus take a sharp breath. "Argent? I thought you destroyed that research." "I should have," Nate said grimly. "He stole it, and he's integrated it into the market. I've found a way to stop it, but I need to execute a trade sequence in the final seconds before market close tomorrow. I need your terminal. I need your help. You're asking me to risk my license, my company, everything, based on a ghost story from a man who disappeared 6 years ago," Marcus said, his voice flat. "Why the hell should I believe you?" This was it, the moment of truth. Nate closed his eyes, picturing his friend. "Because you were there, Marcus. You know what we were building, and you know, deep down, that I didn't do what they said I did. You know it was Landon. I'm asking you to trust what you knew then, not what you've heard since." Another long, agonizing silence. Nate's hope began to fade. "The coffee shop," Marcus said finally, his voice low. "On Grand Street. The one we used to go to. 1 hour, you come alone. If I don't like what I hear, you walk away, and you never call me again." The line went dead. Nate looked at Renata, a wave of relief washing over him. "I have a meeting." A new, desperate, three-pronged plan began to form, their last stand against the ticking clock. "Okay," Renata said, her mind already several steps ahead. "Here's what happens now. The signing ceremony is at 2 p.m. tomorrow. I will go. I will sit across from Landon and Arthur, and I will stall for as long as humanly possible. Evelyn will be with me, ready to deploy our legal poison pill as an absolute last resort." She turned her intense gaze on Nate. "You go meet your friend. You do whatever it takes to get him on our side. Tomorrow, while I'm facing them down, you will be in his office, preparing to pull the kill switch." She walked over to him, her expression a mixture of desperation and unwavering trust. "The fate of this entire company now rests on you and a 6-year-old ghost." The coffee shop on Grand Street was exactly as Nate remembered it. A small, cramped space smelling of burnt espresso and old books. Marcus was already there, sitting in a booth in the back, looking older, more tired, but with the same restless, intelligent energy in his eyes. He didn't get up when Nate approached. 6 years, Nate, Marcus said, his voice low, a mix of old hurt and raw curiosity. You vanished. The official story was fraud. I thought you were guilty. Nate slid into the booth. There was no time for a slow reconciliation. There was only the truth. He laid it all out. Landon's betrayal, the stolen algorithm, the frame-up, his daughter's illness, and the reason he had to disappear. He spoke of the impossible situation at Kensington Enterprises, of the 2 ticking bombs, Cerberus and Argent, and the single, desperate chance they had to disarm them both. He held nothing back. Marcus listened, his expression shifting from stony anger to disbelief, and finally, to a dawning, horrified understanding. He had worked with the Argent Code. He knew its power. He weaponized it, Marcus whispered, shaking his head. That son of a bitch. I always knew there was something wrong with how he pushed you out, but I never imagined. I know I'm asking the impossible, Nate said, his voice raw with desperation. To risk everything on my word. The Nate I knew was the most honest man I ever met, Marcus said, his gaze firming with resolve. He looked at Nate, and for the first time in 6 years, someone saw the man he used to be, not the ghost he had become. He was also a mad genius who built a kill switch into his masterpiece. I'm in. Let's go hunt a ghost Friday, 2 p.m. The boardroom at Kensington Enterprises was a theater of corporate warfare. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the polished mahogany table where Renata sat, flanked by a stone-faced Evelyn Reed. Across from them sat Landon Valerius and Arthur Clements, radiating an aura of triumphant victory. Lawyers and board members lined the table, the air thick with the scent of expensive cologne and impending doom. The documents are in order, Renata, Arthur said, his voice smooth and paternal. Shall we begin? Renata gave a tight, brilliant smile. Of course, Arthur. But a deal of this magnitude. One can't be too careful. I have a few final questions for legal regarding the indemnification clauses. She began her performance. A masterclass in strategic delay, questioning every subsection, every footnote, her voice a perfect blend of professional diligence and barely concealed anxiety. Friday, 3:30 p.m. In the heart of the financial district, in Marcus Cole's high-tech trading office, the atmosphere was electric. Nate and Marcus stood before a bank of monitors, the screens alive with the frantic, final-hour chaos of the market. The kill switch sequence was loaded. It consisted of 17 separate sequential trades, a complex digital poem that had to be executed in a window of less than 3 seconds, just before the 4 p.m. closing bell. It's ready, Marcus said, his hands hovering over the keyboard. Once I start, I can't stop. You have to give the signal at the exact right moment, Nate. Nate's eyes were locked on a single screen showing the faint, rhythmic signature of the Argent protocol. It was still there, a predator waiting patiently for its signal. He thought of Lily, safe at his apartment with Renata's medical team, her future hanging on these next few minutes. Friday, 3:58 p.m. Renata, that's enough, Landon snapped, his patience finally gone. He gestured to the contract. Sign it now, or the hostile bid goes public in 2 minutes, and your board will remove you before the market even closes. It's over. Arthur placed a hand reassuringly on her arm. He's right, my dear. It's time. Renata looked from Landon's smug face to Arthur's false sympathy. She picked up the heavy gold-plated pen. Her hand trembled slightly as she lowered it to the signature line. The room held its breath. At that exact moment, across town, Nate's eyes widened. Now, Marcus! Hit it now! Marcus's fingers flew, a blur of motion. The 17 trades launched into the digital storm of the market. On the screen, Nate saw the kill switch sequence, the illogical, impossible pattern, register on the exchange. For one agonizing second, nothing happened. Then, the rhythmic signature of the Argent protocol flickered, distorted, and vanished. A flat line. "It's gone," Nate breathed, grabbing Marcus's shoulder. "It's gone." Back in the boardroom, just as the tip of Renata's pen touched the paper, Landon's phone buzzed violently on the table. Then Arthur's, then every other board member's. A cascade of frantic alerts. Landon snatched his phone, his confident smile dissolving into a mask of pure, uncomprehending horror as he stared at the screen. The trap had failed to spring. His own company's stock was in a nosedive from a massive, inexplicable sell-off, the echo of the kill switch. He looked up from his phone, his eyes wide with disbelief, and met Renata's gaze. She smiled, a slow, cold, triumphant smile, and gently placed the pen back on the table. Her own phone buzzed with a single, prearranged text from Nate. "The ghost is gone." "Gentlemen," Renata said, her voice ringing with absolute authority. She stood up, every eye in the room now fixed on her. "Before we conclude, it seems a new piece of data has come to my attention. I believe you all should see it." She nodded to Evelyn, who pressed a button on a small remote. The massive screen behind them, which had been displaying the Kensington Enterprises logo, flickered to life. It showed a grainy, covert video. It showed Arthur Clements, sitting in a dimly lit office, calmly plotting her demise with the man sitting right next to him. The room erupted. Arthur Clements made a small strangled noise and seemed to shrink in his chair, a ruined man. Landon Valerius shot to his feet, his face a grotesque mask of rage and defeat. "This is illegal! It's a fabrication!" he roared. But it was too late. The doors to the boardroom opened, and two uniformed security guards, followed by Renata's head of security, stepped inside. They walked calmly, deliberately toward Landon and Arthur. The trap had been sprung, just not the one they had set. 1 month later. The Onyx Tower buzzed with a renewed sense of purpose. Landon Valerius and Arthur Clements were buried under a mountain of federal indictments, their conspiracy exposed in spectacular fashion. Valerius Dynamics was imploding, and Kensington Enterprises, under Renata's now legendary leadership, was stronger than ever. Nate Rowe was no longer a ghost. His name had been publicly cleared, the story of his framing and redemption a quiet legend on Wall Street. He now walked the 81st floor not as a janitor, but as the new head of the company's risk strategy division. He stood by the window of his new, spacious office, looking out at the city. The door opened behind him. "Daddy!" He turned, a real, unguarded smile spreading across his face. Lily ran into his arms, her cheeks rosy, her eyes bright with a healthy energy he hadn't seen in years. She was vibrant. She was cured. "Ready to go, sweet pea?" he asked, hugging her tight. "Ready," she said, her voice full of life. "Don't let me keep you." Renata Kensington stood in the doorway, a soft, genuine smile on her face. The alliance forged in crisis had softened into a deep, abiding friendship. "You earned your weekend." "We both did," Nate said, his heart full of a gratitude so immense it almost overwhelmed him. He looked at his daughter, then at the woman who had gambled everything on a ghost. He had his life back. He had his daughter's future back. He was no longer invisible. Sometimes the most valuable assets aren't on any balance sheet. They are the hidden talents we overlook, the quiet integrity we dismiss, and the courage to listen when a voice speaks the truth from the shadows. And sometimes the greatest risk yields the greatest reward, a second chance. And just like that, another story is over. I always wonder where you all are and what you're doing when you listen to these. If you feel like sharing, drop a comment and let me know. Are you on a long drive, working on something, or just winding down for the night? It's nice to picture the story finding a home with you, wherever you are. If you'd like more stories like this one to keep you company on your journey, you know what to do. Hitting subscribe and that little bell means you'll always have another one waiting for you when you need it. A simple like helps others find a companion in these tales too. Thanks for letting me share this space and time with you. It really is a privilege. Until the next one, stay safe out there.